The rain came down in sheets over Michigan Avenue, turning the city into a blur of headlights and umbrellas. Emma Calloway did not have an umbrella. She had a backpack held over her head, 2 buses to catch. In exactly 11 minutes before her shift started at Elevate, the rooftop restaurant on the 42nd floor of the Sullivan Tower, she made it with 4 minutes to spare. Soaking wet, sneakers squeaking on the marble lobby floor, hair plastered to her forehead like she had personally offended the weather. The lobby security guard, a kind older man named Gerald, who always saved her a coffee from the staff room, gave her a sympathetic look and handed her a paper towel from his desk. "You might want to check the mirror before you go up," he said. Emma looked down at herself. Perfect. She changed into her uniform in the locker room. A crisp white button-down and black apron that Elevate required its staff to wear, and pulled her dark hair into a tight bun. The restaurant was already filling up for the evening. Elevate was the kind of place where a single appetizer cost more than Emma made in 3 hours, where the tablecloths were ironed twice before service, and the sommelier spoke about wine like he was reciting poetry. Emma had worked here for 2 years. She was good at it because she genuinely loved food, loved the alchemy of a perfect meal, and she had taught herself to translate that love into service, without letting the bitterness of waiting tables instead of cooking in them eat her alive. Tonight was different. She could feel it the moment she stepped onto the floor. The restaurant manager, a tightly wound woman named Patricia, intercepted her near the host stand. "Table 12, Emma VIP? Do not mess this up." Patricia walked away before Emma could ask what VIP meant tonight. Though the answer was not hard to guess when she looked across the room and saw the table by the floor-to-ceiling window, the one with the unobstructed view of the city below and the rain-blurred skyline beyond. A man sat alone at table 12. He was not what Emma expected. She had served politicians and celebrities and old money that wore itself so quietly you only recognized it by the watch. This man was younger than she anticipated, somewhere in his mid-30s, with dark hair that looked like it had been professionally styled 3 hours ago and had been quietly rebelling ever since. He was wearing a suit jacket over an open-collared shirt. No tie, and he was staring out at the rain with the particular expression of someone who had come to a very expensive restaurant to be alone with a thought he could not shake. Emma straightened her shoulders and walked over. "Good evening," she said. "My name is Emma, and I will be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink while you look over the menu?" He turned from the window. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, the kind that shifted depending on the light, and they landed on her with a directness that was not unfriendly, but was undeniably sharp. "Just water for now," he said. "And I already know what I want. The black truffle risotto and the branzino." "Thank you." Emma noted it without the little performance most servers did with expensive orders. The impressed nod, the careful repetition. She simply wrote it down and said, "Of course," and went back to the kitchen. The evening moved the way Tuesday evenings at Elevate usually did. Steady, not overwhelming. Emma managed 4 other tables alongside his. She brought his food, refilled his water twice, and noticed that he ate slowly, thoughtfully. The way people eat when the food is genuinely interesting to them rather than just fuel. She liked that about him without meaning to. It was near the end of his meal that it happened. Emma was carrying a dessert tray across the floor when the heel of her left shoe, which had been subtly threatening to betray her for the past hour, finally gave up entirely. The tray tilted. She lurched sideways, grabbing for the nearest stable surface. The nearest stable surface was the edge of table 12. Rhett Sullivan moved without thinking. He was on his feet before the tray hit the ground, one hand catching Emma's elbow, steadying her before she went down completely. The desserts were not so lucky. A chocolate torte and 2 servings of panna cotta landed on the floor in a way that was beautiful in its destruction. Dark chocolate spreading across white marble like a painter had made a decision. Emma straightened up, cheeks burning. She turned to apologize and found herself closer to the man than she expected. Close enough to see that his expression was not annoyed. It was almost amused. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," Emma said. "No, I am so sorry. I will have that cleaned up immediately, and of course there will be no charge for your meal tonight." "I am so sorry." "Stop apologizing," he said, and his voice was calm, not unkind. Shoes give out. It happens, from across the restaurant. Emma could see Patricia's expression cycling through a rapid sequence of emotions, none of them good. What she could not see, what neither of them knew in that moment, was that a couple at the table behind them had a phone out. They had been filming the rain-streaked view of the skyline for a social media story, kind of ambient content that fills, feeds, and disappears by morning. Instead, they had captured something else. A tall man in an expensive suit catching a waitress by the elbow, their faces unexpectedly close. The chocolate spreading across the floor below them like something cinematic. The caption the woman wrote without thinking was, "Sir saved her from the fall and couldn't stop looking at her after. Chicago is alive tonight." She posted it at 9:47 p.m. By midnight, it had 400,000 views. By morning, it had a name. The Chocolate Fall. Emma found out at 6:14 a.m. when her phone started buzzing, so aggressively, she thought something was wrong with it. Her college roommate had texted her a link. Then her mother called. Then 3 numbers she did not recognize. She sat up in her small apartment in Logan Square, her broken shoe still sitting by the door where she had left it the night before, and opened the link with one eye still half closed from sleep. There she was. There he was. The angle was flattering in a way real life rarely managed, the window light catching both of them at the exact moment he had steadied her. His hand on her arm, their faces closer than the circumstances had required. The internet had decided, in the efficient and merciless way it always did, what the image meant. Comments ran from beautiful to fate to someone in the replies had already made a fan account. Emma stared at her phone for a long time, then she looked up Rhett Sullivan. Because she had not known his name until Gerald had mentioned it on her way out the night before, and learned in approximately 40 seconds that he was the founder and CEO of Sullivan Global, that his company was worth somewhere north of $4 billion, and that he had appeared on the cover of Forbes 2 years ago with a headline, calling him the most private billionaire in American business. Emma put her phone face down on the mattress. She picked it up again. She put it face down again. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she did not have saved. It read, "This is Rhett Sullivan. I got your number from restaurant management. I apologize for the intrusion. I think we need to talk before this gets further out of hand. Are you available this morning?" Emma read the message 3 times. Then she typed back, "How did you know this would get out of hand?" His reply came in under a minute, because it already has. "Check Twitter." She checked Twitter. The chocolate fall was trending in Chicago, then nationally, then in a way that had pushed on to international feeds before the American morning had properly started. Someone had already written a thread with 17 entries theorizing about their relationship. A morning show had sent a producer to the restaurant asking for comment, and Rhett Sullivan, the most private billionaire in American business, was apparently in the middle of a very public board dispute that had been the top story in financial news for 6 days. A hostile attempt by 3 major shareholders to force him out of his own company on grounds of mismanagement. Until this morning, the story had been running entirely against him. This morning, every headline had shifted. They were talking about the waitress and the billionaire and the chocolate and the rain, and nobody was talking about the board. Emma sat with that information for exactly 3 minutes before she typed back, "Tell me where to meet you." Rhett Sullivan chose a coffee shop on the north side, the kind of place that was the deliberate opposite of his own restaurants. Mismatched chairs, a chalkboard menu, a barista with paint-stained fingers who did not look up when the door opened. Emma arrived 5 minutes early out of habit and found him already there, sitting in the corner with 2 coffees on the table and his phone turned face down like he was trying to give it a timeout. He stood when she walked in. She had not expected that. "You did not have to come," he said. "You said we needed to talk," Emma said, sitting down. "So talk." He sat back down, wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, and looked at her with that same directness she remembered from the restaurant. Up close, without the theater of Elevate around them, he looked like someone who had not slept well. There were shadows under his eyes and a tension around his jaw that the room light at Elevate had hidden. "I want to be honest with you," he said, "about what is happening and what I am about to ask." "All right," Emma said. My company is in the middle of a board dispute. 3 shareholders are trying to remove me based on what they are calling a pattern of impulsive decision-making. They have been feeding stories to the press for 2 weeks. Last night, before this photo surfaced, I was losing the narrative completely. He paused. This morning, I am not. Because everyone is talking about a waitress and a billionaire and a very unlucky dessert tray. Emma looked at him steadily. And you want to use that? He did not look away. I want to ask if you would be willing to let me use it, publicly, for a period of time. I would compensate you fairly. You would have full control over what you share and what you do not. And I would be transparent with you about every step. Emma thought about the 400,000 views. She thought about the fan account. She thought about her broken shoe and her student debt and the cafe she had been dreaming about for 3 years that kept feeling one catastrophe away from impossible. She thought about the way he had caught her without, hesitating, and then told her to stop. Apologizing. What does letting you use it mean exactly? She asked. It means appearing with me publicly a handful of times over the next 2 to 3 weeks. It means not correcting the story the internet has already written. It does not mean lying. It does not mean anything you are not comfortable with. He met her eyes. I am not asking you to pretend to be something you are not. I am asking you to let people believe what they already want to believe. Emma looked down at her coffee. It was good coffee, which felt like a small, important detail. I have a food blog, she said. He blinked. I did not know that I had been writing it for 4 years. Good food at real prices, neighborhood places, honest reviews. I have about 12,000 followers. It is not much, but I built it myself, and I care about it. She looked up at him. If I do this, I want something in return. Not just money. I want to feature in Sullivan Global's hospitality newsletter. Full editorial control. My voice, my writing. I want access to your executive chef at the Grant for One interview. And I want a letter of recommendation from you directly to the Small Business Development Center so I can apply for a cafe loan without my application getting buried. Rhett Sullivan stared at her. You came prepared? He said. I came caffeinated, Emma said. There is a difference. But yes, something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but in the neighborhood of one. Done, he said. All of it. Emma extended her hand across the table. He shook it. His grip was firm and brief, businesslike, which was exactly what this was supposed to be. Businesslike. A transaction with terms. They both understood. What she did not plan for was the week that followed. The appearances were simple at first. A Saturday morning at a farmer's market on the lakefront, where someone recognized them, and a photographer, materialized seemingly out of thin air. A Tuesday evening at a charity preview for a children's hospital gala where Rhett was already scheduled to attend. Emma wore a dress she borrowed from her coworker Priya and spent 45 minutes on the bus convincing herself she was simply a professional doing a job. Rhett met her at the entrance and offered his arm and told her quietly as they walked inside that she looked like she belonged there. Which was exactly the right thing to say, and she hated how much it steadied her. He was good at that. Steadying people. She watched him do it in meetings he allowed her to observe as part of their agreement. The quiet, confident way he redirected a conversation that was turning hostile. The way he listened to his staff without performing the act of listening. He was not performing anything. That was the thing she kept coming back to. She had expected a man who had built $4 billion to be coated in some kind of strategic veneer. He was not. He was just himself. Inconveniently, genuinely himself. On the 9th day, they were sitting in the private dining room of one of his restaurants after a press dinner, waiting for the last of the guests to clear out. Emma had eaten well and was slightly tired in the pleasant way that came from a long day done properly. Rhett had taken off his jacket and his tie was loosened, and he was reading something on his tablet with the expression of a man encountering an argument that was only partly convincing him. She heard herself ask, before she had decided to, why does it matter so much to you? The company, I mean. You have more money than you could spend. Why fight this hard to keep control? He set the tablet down and looked at her, Sullivan Global started as a single hotel, he said. My mother cleaned rooms in it when I was 8 years old. I used to go with her on summer days because we could not afford childcare. And she would give me a rag and let me help, so I felt useful. I bought that hotel when I was 29. His voice was even unperformative. I built everything else around it because I wanted to prove that the people in this industry, the ones cleaning the rooms and bussing the tables and carrying the trays, I wanted to prove they deserved to work somewhere that took them seriously. The men trying to remove me want to cut labor costs. They think the brand is the rooms and the amenities. I think the brand is the people. Emma looked at him for a long moment. You should have led with that, she said. In every interview, that story. I do not like using my mother as a press strategy. You are not using her. You are explaining who you are. There is a difference. She leaned forward. Let me write it. For the blog. Your words, my framing. Not a press release. Something real. He was quiet. Then you would do that? That is what I do, Emma said. I write about things that deserve to be understood better than they are, he agreed. She wrote it that night at her kitchen table, the city quiet outside. Her broken shoe still sitting by the door because she had not gotten around to replacing it. She published it the next morning with a simple headline. What he told me over dinner, that no press release? Everwood had 2 million reads by evening. The board dispute shifted decisively in Rhett's favor within the week. The shareholders withdrew 2 of their 3 complaints. Financial analysts wrote about the human interest story that had reframed the narrative. Emma's blog gained 40,000 followers in 5 days. On the last scheduled appearance of their agreement, a rooftop garden opening in the Gold Coast, they stood together at the edge of the terrace with the city spread below them, and Emma realized. She had stopped calculating when their agreement ended. She was simply there, standing next to him, looking at Chicago like it was a thing they were seeing together for the first time. I think we have fulfilled the terms, Rhett said. Yes, Emma said. I think we have. They were both quiet. His hand was near hers on the railing, not touching. Near the blog recommendation, he said. I sent it this morning. And the chef interview is scheduled for Thursday. And the newsletter slot is yours for as long as you want it. Thank you, Emma said, genuinely. He turned to look at her. She turned to look at him. The city hummed below them, indifferent and magnificent. I know the terms are fulfilled, Rhett said carefully. But I find that I would like to have dinner with you. Not for appearances. Not for the narrative. Just because you are the most interesting person I have talked to in longer than I want to admit. Emma looked at him for a long moment. I have a broken shoe I still have not replaced, she said. So I might fall again. Rhett Sullivan almost smiled. Then, I will catch you. Emma looked back at the city. Okay. She said dinner, but I am picking the restaurant. He laughed, a real one, quiet and warm and entirely unperformed. And Emma thought that sound was something she could get used to, which was either the beginning of something wonderful or the most honest thing that had happened to her all week. She decided it was both. The Thursday chef interview changed everything. Though not in the way Emma expected, she arrived at the Grant, Sullivan Global's flagship restaurant in River North with her recorder, her notebook, and the particular focused energy she reserved for work she genuinely cared about. The executive chef was a broad-shouldered woman named Celeste Ford, who had trained in Lion and cooked like she had something to prove to every person who had ever underestimated her. Emma liked her immediately. They talked for 2 hours about sourcing and technique and the specific loneliness of being the only woman in a professional kitchen for the first decade of your career. And by the end, Emma had material for 3 pieces. Not 1. Rhett was not supposed to be there. He had a board meeting that morning and another in the afternoon, and his assistant had confirmed the schedule twice. But when Emma was packing up her recorder in the empty dining room, footsteps crossed the floor, and she looked up, and there he was in his suit jacket, tie already loosened at noon, carrying 2 espressos from the bar. Celeste told me you were still here, he said. I had 20 minutes between meetings. He handed her one of the espressos and sat down across from her at the table she'd been using. It was a simple gesture, the kind that required no explanation and asked for nothing. Emma noticed she had stopped cataloging his gestures. Early in their arrangement, she had been reading them the way she read a menu, assessing, understanding what they signaled. Now they just landed on her directly without the layer of analysis between. "How was she?" he asked. "Remarkable," Emma said. "You should be prouder of who you have working for you." "I know who I have working for me," Rhett said. That was the whole point. They sat with their espressos for a few minutes. The restaurant was quiet before the lunch service began. The low winter light coming through the front windows in the particular way that made Chicago look like a painting of itself. "I read the piece again this morning," he said. "The one you wrote about me?" Emma looked at him. "It was published 3 weeks ago." The press had moved on. His board situation had resolved. The viral story had faded into the background of the internet, the way all viral stories eventually did, replaced by the next beautiful or strange or heartbreaking thing. "Why?" she asked. "Because I keep thinking about something you wrote," he said. He looked at his espresso cup. "You wrote that I built the company around a belief that service is not something people did for money, but something they offered from dignity. And then you wrote that you could see it in the way he listened to people. Not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually taking them in." He looked up. "Nobody has ever written about me that way," he said. "Not in $4 billion worth of press coverage. And I kept wondering if you wrote it because it was what you observed or because you wanted it to be true." Emma held his gaze. "I write what I observe," she said. "I am not in the business of flattering people. My readers trust me because I do not do that." "I know," he said. "That is why I kept reading it." The kitchen sounds started behind the closed doors. It's the beginning of prep service, the particular percussion of a professional kitchen waking up. Emma thought about the terms of their agreement, which had technically concluded 5 days ago when the rooftop garden dinner ended and they both acknowledged it out loud while standing at the railing, and then done nothing about what was clearly happening between them except agree to have dinner. The dinner had not happened yet. They had both been busy. Or they had both been careful. Emma was not entirely sure which. She cleared her throat. "The piece for the newsletter," she said. "I am thinking about writing it on neighborhood food culture. How the best meals in a city are never in the buildings that make the guidebooks. I want to interview 4 or 5 owners from different neighborhoods, real places, counter service and family spots and food stalls." Rhett looked at her. "That is a good piece." "I know it is," Emma said. She smiled a little. "I am good at my job." Something in his expression settled, became more direct. "Emma," he said, "I think you know that what I want is not to talk about the newsletter." "I know," she said. "I am just giving you a minute to figure out how to say it." He was quiet for a moment. Then, with the same plainness he brought to everything, "I have spent 10 years making decisions by calculating outcomes." He set down his espresso cup. "I calculated that hiring you was strategically sound. I calculated that the arrangement would serve both our interests. I calculated every appearance and every press opportunity and every public moment." Emma waited. "I cannot calculate this," he said. "What I feel when you are in the room, it does not fit into a strategy. It just exists." He looked at her steadily. "I am not good at things that do not fit into a strategy. But I find I do not want to walk away from it because it makes me uncomfortable." Emma looked at him for a long moment. The kitchen sounds continued behind the door. The winter light moved slightly as a cloud passed over Michigan Avenue. "You held a press arrangement together for 3 weeks," she said, "and treated me with more straightforward respect than most people manage in 3 years. She folded her hands on the table. "I think you are better at this than you are giving yourself credit for." "This," he said. "Caring about someone," Emma said simply. "Without calculating whether it is efficient?" Rhett Sullivan looked at her, those gray-green eyes that shifted with the light. Then he said, "Have dinner with me tonight." "Not in one of my restaurants." "Somewhere you choose." "Somewhere that is your city, not mine." Emma thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "There is a Thai place on Milwaukee Avenue," she said. 8 tables, cash only. The owner has been making the same curry for 30 years. It is the best meal in Chicago, and it costs $14. Rhett did not blink. Perfect. They walked out of the grant together and parted on the sidewalk, because they both had afternoon work. Emma took the bus north and sat by the window and watched the city go by without writing anything in her notebook, which was unusual for her. She was usually always writing something, processing through language the way other people process through conversation. But today, she just sat with the feeling, letting it exist without turning it into words yet. That evening, she wore her regular clothes. Jeans and a dark green sweater and new shoes, finally. A simple pair of boots that were not going to betray her. She met Rhett outside the restaurant on Milwaukee at 7, and he was wearing dark trousers and a coat and no tie, and he looked like a person rather than a cover story, which was the version of him she liked best. The owner, a small man in his 70s named Mr. Prassett, seated them at the table by the window and brought them water and menus without any ceremony. Rhett studied the menu with genuine attention, the same way he had eaten his risotto at Elevate weeks ago. And Emma thought about how that had been the first thing she noticed about him, that he was actually present with the food. "What do you recommend?" he asked. "Everything," Emma said. "But start with the green curry and the papaya salad, and if you still have room, there is a sticky rice. Dessert that will make you reconsider." Every dessert you have ever eaten, Rhett ordered exactly. That Mr. Prassett brought the food and departed without hovering, and the off-stock restaurant was warm and small and smelled like lemongrass and chili, and the quiet pleasure of a meal that had been perfected through patience. They talked for 3 hours. Not about the board dispute or the blog or Sullivan Global or the viral photo. They talked about Emma's parents, both school teachers in Indiana, who had raised her to believe that good work done honestly was its own reward, which she believed and also found occasionally exhausting to live up to. They talked about Rhett's mother, who was now retired and lived in Scottsdale, and called him every Sunday morning at 8, regardless of time zones. They talked about the hotel where she had cleaned rooms, which Rhett had renamed after her when he bought it, a detail that was not in any press release, and that Emma filed away in a part of herself that had nothing to do with the blog. They talked about what it felt like to want something so specifically that the wanting becomes its own kind of discipline. Emma talked about the cafe, the exact version of it she had been building in her imagination for 3 years. Small, neighborhood, serious about the food without being precious. The kind of place that became someone's regular spot without trying to be anything other than itself. Rhett listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You will have it. Not because I am going to hand it to you. Because you are the kind of person who builds things that last." Emma looked at him across the small table in the small restaurant with its 8 tables and its $14 curry and its 30 years of the same perfected dish. "You are not as bad at this as you think," she said. He reached across the table and his hand covered hers, warm and unhurried. "I am learning," he said. Outside, Milwaukee Avenue moved past the window in its ordinary evening way. Buses and pedestrians, and the particular light of a city in winter that was somehow more beautiful for being familiar. Emma turned her hand over under his, a small deliberate movement, and laced her fingers through his and felt him hold on. There was no photo taken, no caption written, no views to count in the morning, just 2 people in a warm room with good food and something real beginning between them. The kind of thing that does not need the internet to make it true because it already is.